Hey guys, tonight we step gently into a world where the air itself is part of the architecture. You're not in your noisy apartment or a crowded modern city. No, you've wandered into an ancient Persian garden, lush, geometric, a mirage made solid. You're walking barefoot along sun-warmed paths lined with roses and cypress trees. Every step carries the scent of saffron and wet earth. And the most startling part? Even in the sweltering desert sun, the breeze that greets your skin is somehow cool. Not fake, air conditioner chill, this is honest wind, sculpted by stone and shadowed at its evening, but the sun still clings to the sky like an overachiever. You glance around for a bench, maybe a shaded nook, but instead you find yourself marveling at how the wind seems to know where to go. It snakes through narrow corridors, slips beneath shaded arches, glides over water, and always finds you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've entered a 6th century Persian garden, probably one built during the time of the Sassanid Empire, back when Persia stretched wide and proud across deserts and mountains. You're in what's known as a Chahar Bagh, or four-part garden. The space is divided by water channels that cross at right angles, forming a green square of divine order. Paradise wasn't some fluffy cloud in the sky, it was this, right here. A garden on earth that mirrored heaven. You hear birds. Not caged ones, mind you, but songbirds who've claimed the garden as their own, nightingales, maybe a hoopoe or two. You wonder if that bird was mentioned in the old Persian epics. Probably. Everything seems to have history here, even the way the shadows fall. The gardener, a wiry man with sun-darkened skin and a robe the color of pistachios, greets you without speaking. He doesn't need to. His nod is enough to say, yes, this garden is alive. Yes, you're allowed in. But behave, will you? Your sandals crunch softly over gravel. Every corner of this garden is full of careful choices: pomegranate trees for shade and juice, cypress trees for vertical drama, jasmine and basil planted precisely where the breeze will carry their scent down your path. This isn't accidental beauty. It's curated, engineered, and, let's be honest, mildly smug. You pass a shallow pool. It's perfectly still, mirroring the sky with eerie precision. You bend to touch it, and the water is, surprisingly, cool. Your reflection ripples and vanishes. Now, imagine designing this entire space without electricity, without motors or thermostats. That's what ancient Persian gardeners did. They harnessed nature like a polite but firm host. Wind. Invited. Heat. Kindly shown the door. Historians still argue whether the earliest Chahar Bagh layouts came from Persia itself or were influenced by Mesopotamian sacred spaces. But in this moment, the debate seems a little silly. You're surrounded by proof that the Persians took whatever inspiration they had and made it sing. You settle onto a low stone bench tucked beneath a fig tree. The breeze that finds you is not just lucky. It's been summoned, guided by the very shape of the walls around you. It travels over water, under archways, between thick stone columns that radiate stored coolness from the night before. And here's the quirky part: some of the garden's best cooling tricks were probably discovered accidentally. A broken clay pipe here, a poorly sealed room there, and someone realized, hey, if we angle this just right, the air comes out refreshingly pleasant. The gardener approaches, carrying a tiny metal kettle. He pours tea, black, fragrant, with a wisp of steam. But not scalding. The tea is warm, not hot, as though it has already been kissed by the wind. You sip. The flavor is layered: tannins, mint, maybe a dash of rosewater. And the cup itself? Kept cool in a niche carved into the stone wall. Passive refrigeration, thanks to thick walls and deep shade. Somewhere nearby, water trickles, likely from a canet, an underground channel stretching miles from a distant mountain spring. We'll get to that clever bit of engineering later, but just know that everything in this garden whispers efficiency. Even the pebbles under your feet were chosen for sound. crunchy enough to announce footsteps but soft enough not to wake sleeping cats, your mind drifts. There's a reason this garden feels so familiar. It's been copied everywhere. From Andalusian courtyards to Mughal palace lawns, even to some European estates, this concept of the earthly paradise, sectioned off and scented, all began right here, and while you're lounging, consider this, these gardens were not just for nobles or kings. In many cases, they were public or semi-public spaces. You, yes, you, might have been allowed in, especially if you brought a scroll or a musical instrument. Or at least a good attitude and quiet sandals. Even now, as night settles and the stars begin to freckle the sky, you can feel the garden changing temperature. It doesn't panic. It adapts. The stone cools. The breeze shifts. A candle flickers nearby, unbothered. So lie back if you haven't already. This is only the beginning. There are underground rivers to follow, towers that inhale and exhale, and at least one surprisingly dramatic story about a teacup that got stolen and started a minor feud. But for now, you're just a guest in a garden where even the air is art. You lean back on the smooth stone bench, arms lazily draped along its cool surface, and let your eyelids droop a little. It's not just the tea working its magic, it's everything. The air, the scent, the quiet authority of ancient stone. And then, as if your curiosity could be heard rustling through the fig leaves, the gardener gestures toward the far end of the courtyard where a peculiar structure rises out of the garden wall. Tall, hollow, with slits and vents near the top, it looks almost like a strange chimney built upside down. You're looking at a badger, or wind catcher. It's one of the oldest air conditioning systems in the world, and it works without a single moving part. You might think of it as ancient desert tech, but to the people of Persia, it was just sensible architecture. And while historians still argue whether the design originated in Yazd or earlier in Egypt, there's little debate that Persians perfected it. The idea is deceptively simple. The tower stands tall enough to catch high-altitude breezes. The internal shaft channels the cooler, faster air down into the rooms below. Meanwhile, warmer air, being lighter, naturally rises and exits out the top. It's a perfect convection loop, wind in, heat out. You don't need freon, wires, or a user manual. You just need centuries of observation, a bit of math, and a healthy respect for how air behaves. As you stroll toward the base of the wind catcher, you notice a small door that leads into the adjacent tea house, more of a shaded alcove than a building, really. The inside is surprisingly cool, and you don't even feel the breeze at first. It moves like a whisper over your skin, gentle, consistent, and just strong enough to rustle the fabric of your sleeve. The sensation is oddly intimate, like being lightly fanned by an invisible servant who's been doing this since before the invention of socks. Inside the wind catcher shaft, a narrow ledge runs along the wall. On it sits a line of clay pots filled with water. Why? Because the airflow passes over the water, evaporating just enough to cool the air further before it enters the living spaces. That's right, evaporative cooling, the kind your swamp cooler tries, and often fails, to imitate. And here's the quirky bit, sometimes they floated herbs or rose petals in the water pots, turning the breeze into a scented lullaby. Imagine your living room fan doing that instead of just redistributing dog hair. The tea house attendant, an elderly woman with bracelets stacked up her wrist, nods at you approvingly as she tops off your cup. She sees the awe on your face and chuckles softly. "It's just the wind," she says in Persian. "We only showed it the way." Historians still puzzle over how standardized these wind catcher designs were. Some featured elaborate directional fins, guiding wind from multiple angles. Others were simpler, just vertical shafts built to optimize shade and height. There were even experiments with dual-chamber systems, using one shaft to pull air in and another to push it out, creating a full loop of ventilation through subterranean channels. Speaking of underground, there's more to this than just towers. Below your feet lies a hidden world of tunnels, gently sloped and lined with water, canets. These ancient underground aqueducts carried fresh mountain spring water across great distances with almost no evaporation. By running the wind catcher shaft down into a canet's tunnel, they cooled the air even more, creating a kind of natural refrigeration system. this setup was so effective that in some desert cities, they used it to store ice. Yes, ice. In the desert. They'd harvest ice from higher altitudes in the winter, pack it into deep, shaded yakshuls, dome-shaped cool houses with thick insulating walls, and keep it frozen for months. How? Because of the wind catchers and cannets working together like some kind of eco-friendly HVAC dream team, you sip your tea again. The cup's metal is cool against your fingers. It was sitting in a wall niche, remember? And that niche isn't just a shelf, it's part of the passive cooling. Thick mud brick walls, sometimes a meter wide, keep the heat out during the day and release stored coolness after sunset. This isn't luxury, it's necessity, dressed in elegance. In modern architecture, people talk about sustainability like it's a shiny new thing. But here in ancient Persia, they'd already figured out how to tame the harshest climate using only what they had: wind, water, earth, and time. No solar panels. No noise. Just quiet intelligence etched into every archway and air shaft. A cat slips into the room, stretches dramatically, and settles under a low stone bench. Even she knows where the draft is best. You stand, now a little wiser, and feel the air as you exit. It's cooler outside than it should be. The badger looms behind you, still working, still catching the wind that glides over the top of the city. Your host waves you toward another path, a narrow channel that slopes ever so slightly downward. Follow the water, she says. You do. The stream flows quietly beside you, a part of the same cannet system that powers the garden. You realize that the water isn't just decoration. It's cooling the air. The narrowness of the path funnels the breeze directly over it. By the time it reaches your ankles, it's practically sighing. You smile. No wires, no screens. Just earth and air, doing their thing. Somewhere along the way, humanity forgot about this kind of elegance. But tonight, you're remembering. You follow the trickling stream as it winds through the garden path, your steps slowing in rhythm with the water's gentle murmur. Every so often, it slips beneath a stone bridge or pools momentarily in a shallow basin, as if pausing to admire the sycamores above. These aren't just quaint features of a pretty garden, they're all deliberate, part of a sophisticated cooling system that would make any modern HVAC engineer blush into their clipboard. But now, you're curious, who figured this all out? Who first looked at a sun-scorched landscape and thought, ah yes, let's build a water maze to cool our tea? The answer: the Persian garden architects, or bagsaz, a term that sounds gentle and pleasant, which it is, but also masks the staggering genius of their work. These were people who took barren land and turned it into Eden using mathematics, astronomy, hydrology, and a poet's eye. The gardens they built weren't just oases, they were diagrams of the cosmos. You step into a clearing, and there it is. A garden so symmetrical it makes you stand up straighter without meaning to. Every tree, shrub, and path is mirrored in layout. This is the Chahar Bagh, a four-part garden design based on Zoroastrian and later Islamic principles, symbolizing the four rivers of paradise. And while it's easy to get distracted by the pomegranates or the flirty little sparrows, it's the water channels, or rills, that steal the show. These shallow, tiled aqueducts split the garden into quadrants and serve as both irrigation and air conditioning. Water gliding through narrow stone channels reflects light upward and radiates coolness outward. The sound of the water. Not an accident either. It's tuned, yes, tuned, to mask city noise and lull the listener into a state of calm. Think ancient white noise machine, but made of clay and genius. You pass by a pavilion, open on all sides, sitting right at the junction of the water channels. The air here feels like it's been curated, cooled by the breeze, moistened by the water, and scented by the fig trees nearby. There's a low stone table in the center, and resting atop it, a familiar sight, a metal teapot and four small, delicate glasses, each nested in a copper holder. It's tea time again, obviously, and here's the kicker: they didn't just drink hot tea in the desert heat for no reason. Ancient Persians believed that drinking hot tea actually helped regulate body temperature by encouraging a subtle sweat that then cooled you. Historians still argue whether this logic holds up to modern physiology, but they all agree on one thing: no one did tea presentation like the Persians. You pour yourself a glass. It's a dark, amber color with a light steam rising. The sugar cube, balanced precariously on your tongue while you sip, of course. That's how it's done, but let's talk about that tea cooling technique, the one that doesn't involve ice. In these gardens, teapots were often placed in stone niches or small depressions carved into shaded benches, where the air was naturally a few degrees cooler thanks to the airflow from nearby wind catchers or subterranean ducts. Sometimes, teapots were even set atop porous clay trays soaked with cool water. As the water slowly evaporated, it drew heat away from the vessel, a trick borrowed from the same principle that cools sweating skin. Think of it as a desert minibar, and while that's impressively low-tech, one method stands out as particularly charming: the stone tea cradle. A shallow stone basin, often built near the edge of a channel, was filled with water and lined with smooth pebbles. The teapot was placed atop this riverbed cradle, allowing water to lap gently at the base without fully submerging it. The effect was a slow, graceful cooling, just enough to bring the tea to a perfect sipping temperature without shocking it cold. You run your fingers through one of these tea basins now, the water brushing against your skin like a lazy silk scarf. It's almost too poetic to be real. But real it is, and just when you think you've seen all the tricks, a gardener walks past holding a ceramic jar with tiny holes all around its surface. Curious, you follow. He hangs it from a wooden beam in the shade, right above where two garden paths meet. A moment later, a light mist begins to drift from the jar. It's a Mr. Pot, an ancient form of air freshener and cooler combined. Filled with water and occasionally herbs like mint or basil, it slowly releases moisture into the air through tiny perforations. As the air flows past, it lifts the moisture and scent outward, cooling and perfuming the area like a spa invented by someone who also loved geometry. It's this subtle layering of senses, breeze, water, scent, sound, that turns the Persian garden into something more than architecture. It's a full-body lullaby disguised as landscaping. And here you are, right in the middle of it, sipping warm tea from a wind-cooled pot while birds play tag in the citrus trees. And let's not forget, these gardens weren't just playgrounds for royalty. They were spiritual, philosophical expressions. The garden was a metaphor for life, for balance, for the universe's order. Even the flow of water was symbolic. Some scholars argue it represented knowledge moving through time, always carving its path, always finding the lowest, most humble route. You take another sip and lean back into the pavilion's curved bench. Somewhere behind you, the wind catcher is doing its invisible work, coaxing the air just slightly cooler. Somewhere ahead, the cannet carries unseen water beneath your feet. But for now, you're here, midway between fire and water, sun and shade, dreaming in the geometry of paradise, and all because someone, centuries ago, wanted their tea a little cooler. The shadows have shifted a little as you wander farther through the garden, the air noticeably cooler beneath a canopy of tamarisk trees. You can hear the soft creak of a wooden gate up ahead, and beyond it lies the architectural heart of this entire oasis, not a palace, not a temple, but the windcatcher, or badger, rising like a sandstone periscope above the compound wall. It looks deceptively simple, just a tall tower with open slats, but as you step closer and crane your neck to peer upward, you realize this is no ordinary air duct. This is ancient Persia's secret weapon in the battle against oppressive heat. You step inside the adjacent structure, a quiet summer room with thick clay walls, and immediately feel it, a whisper of cool air drifting across your cheek. Not forced, not mechanical, just there. Like a soft sigh from the desert itself. Here's how it works. The badger stands tall, catching even the faintest breeze that schemes over rooftops. It channels the wind downward through internal shafts, where it either moves directly into the rooms below or passes over a cannet-cooled pool, a trick you saw in the garden's central pavilion. This airflow isn't just a happy accident. It's engineered using principles we now call Bernoulli's equation and the Venturi effect. Persians didn't need to name them, they just used them. Now here's the fun part. When the wind isn't blowing, the badger still works. That's right, it functions in reverse. Hot air from inside the building rises naturally and escapes out the top, drawing cooler air up from shaded courtyards and cannets below. Historians still argue whether these towers evolved independently or were influenced by earlier Egyptian or Babylonian designs, but Persia perfected the model. Some could rotate directionally to chase the wind. Others were built in fours, catching breezes from any side like a weather-conscious ninja. You rest your hand on one of the inner stone walls. It's cool to the touch, even though the day outside is heating up. The reason? These buildings were designed to breathe. Thick adobe walls absorb heat during the day and release it at night. Ceilings are high to keep warm air aloft. Floors, especially in wealthier homes, were sometimes covered with wet rush mats or smooth tiles cooled by air currents. Add in the badger and you've got a climate control system that's silent, sustainable, and stylishly ancient, and let's not overlook the style. These weren't industrial-looking boxes. Many wind catchers were carved with decorative niches, tiled in lapis blues or adorned with scriptural calligraphy, literal poetry in the air. Some were capped with clay finials shaped like cypress cones, a nod to Zoroastrian symbolism. You're not just cooling a house here, you're harmonizing with the divine airflow of creation. As you follow the breeze down a corridor lined with arched niches, you enter a smaller sitting room, sunken slightly below ground level. A central stone bowl, perhaps once filled with rosewater, sits beneath the shaft's exit. You hear the flutter of fabric, a curtain stirring where none should move. That's the badger at work again, its fingers of wind lifting the linen like a breath, and this is where the tea returns. In summer, hosts would often set tea trays in this very chamber, relying on the consistent draft to cool the drink just enough to refresh without shocking the senses. Some texts mention adding saffron or cardamom not only for flavor, but because these spices were believed to balance the internal winds of the body. Persian medical theory, steeped in humoral balance, connected digestion, mood, and temperature in surprisingly sophisticated ways. You weren't just cooling tea. You were cooling the soul. Speaking of souls, let's talk about sleep. In ancient Yazd and Kashan, entire families would sleep in rooms with built-in wind catchers during hot months. They'd lay down on charpoys, woven rope beds, and let the air float over dampened cotton sheets, essentially creating a human swamp cooler. Sounds odd? Maybe. But ask yourself, which would you prefer, noisy AC or a whispering breeze infused with rosewater and faint traces of mint? You glance up again at the windcatcher shaft. A beam of light slices through it like a sundial, reminding you that this entire cooling system also served as a kind of clock. The quality of air, the angle of light, the direction of wind, all told the time better than a wristwatch ever could. Just then, a small boy runs past the doorway, laughing, a kite trailing behind him made from oiled paper and thin sticks. His grandmother calls after him in Farsi, holding a tray of tea so steady it might as well be levitating. She pauses in the doorway, smiles at you, and sets the tray beside the bowl. There's no ice, no fan, no refrigerated pitcher, just the soft kiss of air, and a perfectly steeped brew. You sip again. The tea is slightly cooler now, just enough to notice. The flavors bloom more slowly, unfolding like stories. You imagine centuries of people, poets, merchants, astronomers, sitting in this exact spot, sipping, thinking, cooling down, and that's the magic of the windcatcher. It doesn't fight nature. It partners with it. It listens to the breeze and gives it a task. And in return, it offers you a seat, a shade, a drink, and a moment to just exist quietly within time. You close your eyes. The air hums around you like a lullaby told by the earth itself. You linger in that shaded chamber for a while longer, until the sun has shifted just enough to beckon you forward again. You rise slowly, stepping back into the garden, where the windcatcher continues its silent work behind you. The path winds toward the back of the compound now, past narrow alleys lined with brick and tile, until you find yourself facing something unexpected, a small, sloping entrance leading below ground. Not a cellar, not a crypt, not a fridge. But make it ancient. Welcome to the Yakshal, Persia's ice pit. Yes, really. Long before modern refrigeration, Persian engineers were harvesting ice. In the desert, you duck slightly to enter, and the air shifts again, cooler, even damp. The structure widens as you descend, revealing a deep, cone-shaped chamber with thick walls made of special mortar called saruj, a mixture of clay, egg whites, lime, goat hair, and ash. Sounds like the world's least appetizing cake, but it's shockingly effective. Waterproof. Heat-resistant. Durable for centuries, and the shape. A reverse beehive, engineered to minimize heat transfer and maximize thermal inertia. These yakshals could maintain freezing temperatures inside even while summer blazed above. Go ahead, whisper a little, "whoa," to yourself. You're not alone. Back in the day, ice was harvested from nearby mountains during winter or created in shallow pools overnight, thanks to the desert's wild temperature swings. Once frozen, the blocks were hauled into the yakshal and buried under layers of straw. Families or entire towns would access it gradually throughout the year, especially during festivals or sweltering afternoons, and the tea. You're already thinking it. That steaming brew you sipped earlier could, on certain elite occasions, be served with a delicate shard of ice from this very chamber. Not to cool it completely, no, that would be uncouth, but to add just enough contrast. Like Persian poetry, where sweetness and bitterness dance side by side, that there's even evidence that some desserts, like early versions of faluda, thin noodles in rosewater syrup, were cooled with this very ice. The earliest ice cream, if you will. Historians still argue whether Persian yakshals inspired similar techniques in Rome and later Europe, or if the knowledge flowed in the other direction along the Silk Roads. But it's clear that Persia wasn't just preserving perishable goods here, they were preserving a way of life. Let's pause and appreciate the layering. Wind catchers cooled the air. Gardens cooled the senses. Yakshals cooled your literal tea. This wasn't a single invention, it was a culture of cool, woven into everything. You run your fingers along the inner wall. The saruj texture is rough but strangely reassuring. You imagine the workers who packed ice here, wearing long linen tunics, wrapping their heads against the cold in a reversal of their daytime garb. You picture a teenage apprentice sneaking a chipped piece of ice into his mouth, then flinching as his teeth scream from the cold. He's scolded by an elder. "That's for the guests," the man says. "And you're not invited." Some noble families even etched family seals into the inside walls of their private yakshals, as if to say, "This chill is ours." Others used the space for cooling medicinal herbs or preserving delicate fruits like apricots and mulberries. You can almost smell the ghost of dried mint in the in one forgotten corner of the chamber. There's a clay urn, empty now, but likely once filled with steeped syrup or pomegranate juice, cooled slowly for a summer gathering. The cupbearer would ladle it out by candlelight, telling stories with each pour. A lion that wouldn't sleep. A prince who solved riddles by moonlight. A desert so hot it burned your name from the sand you breathe in. Even now, the air here feels ancient, weighted, deliberate. And above you, at the very top of the yakshal's cone, there's a tiny vent. Just enough to release pressure, just enough to whisper that it's all so absurdly elegant. These people weren't merely coping with heat. They were crafting an experience. From the moment water trickled down a canet, to the shaded sip of tea or slurp of chilled faluda, the cooling process was a layered performance. The kind that made you slow down. Reflect. Maybe even nap. You climb slowly back toward the daylight, you pause halfway, letting your hand brush the smooth ramp. You think of how many hands before yours have touched this surface. Merchants. Healers. Mothers with baskets of herbs. Children chasing shadows, and as your head emerges once more into the dry sunlight, the contrast hits you like a sigh. Hot, bright, humming with life. But you're cooler now. Inside and out, you blink and spot something curious just ahead, a line of small, domed structures at the garden's edge. Their placement is strategic, like sentinels. You're not done with ancient cooling tricks just yet, but for now, you glance one last time at the low, rounded mouth of the yakshal behind you. It's not just a pit. It's a time machine. Your curiosity tugs at you once more, and so you follow the path that curves around to the domed structures ahead. These aren't just decorative garden features, they're not even just homes or granaries. You've stumbled upon a traditional Persian icehouse, a quiet part of the larger cooling system that's hidden in plain sight. The heat of the desert is undeniable now, its weight pressing against you from all directions. But these structures, they speak of an old, quiet rebellion against it. They're small, but their design is no accident. Their domed rooftops, constructed out of thick brick, interwoven with a kind of ancient artistry, are designed to absorb the least amount of heat while letting out just enough of the cool, night air inside. You'll come to know them as badgers, or wind catchers. You enter one of the structures and immediately notice the difference. The air is noticeably cooler here, even as the desert sun beats down mercilessly outside. You could almost forget it's still high noon, the oppressive heat filtered out, replaced by something closer to the shade of an early evening breeze. This is the genius of Persian engineering at work. The wind catcher, with its distinctive funnel-like shape, is both a passive cooling system and a work of art. The structure works in tandem with the underground cooling system and yakshals, catching the cool winds blowing across the desert during the night. These winds, often carrying a chill, were ushered into these buildings and funneled into spaces where people needed to sleep, eat, or simply pass the hottest parts of the day in comfort. You take a deep breath, and the air around you feels softer somehow, more delicate, as though it's whispering to you. The wind catcher doesn't just catch the wind, it catches the passage of time. In its design, we see not only an answer to the harsh environment but a cultural statement. It's an expression of patience, of understanding that nature's rhythm can be harnessed, bent to one's will, but only if you approach it with respect. These structures didn't just cool air. They were symbols of a lifestyle that valued comfort, contemplation, and community. For the locals, these wind catchers were more than just functional, they were meeting places, where families gathered in the afternoons to share stories, sip sweet tea, and talk about the day's work. In fact, you can imagine the soft clinking of tea glasses, the slow flow of conversation. The buzz of idle chatter wouldn't feel out of place here. Looking around at the quiet, shaded interior, you can picture the ancient Persians sipping that chilled tea, their clothes loose and light, the air above them stirring gently through the windows, their faces relaxed. This was a time when the heat didn't feel like a threat but rather a passing inconvenience, one that they'd learned to live with, and even, in some ways, to appreciate. But the wind catcher wasn't only about surviving the heat, it was also a tool for comfort during the night. It would funnel cool air into sleeping quarters, where the evening air was far more bearable than the brutal midday heat. Imagine lying on a soft rug in the cool, dry evening air, letting the quiet sounds of the wind flow through the rooms like a lullaby. Sleep in ancient Persia was a precious commodity. You didn't just rest your body. You restored your soul. And the wind catcher was there, softly whispering its promise of respite. Even today, the influence of these structures lingers in modern architecture. Some contemporary homes in the region still incorporate these ancient designs, a small nod to the wisdom of their ancestors. The wind catchers stand tall as a tribute to Persian ingenuity, a quiet testament to a people who knew how to make the world around them bend just enough to serve their needs. As you leave the wind catcher and continue on your journey, you wonder, what was it like to live in such harmony with the environment? To understand not just how to survive in the desert, but how to thrive in it. Perhaps that's a lesson the world could use today. That the answer to every problem isn't always the newest invention or the latest technology. Sometimes, the answer lies in quiet patience and the wisdom of the past. You begin walking again, the garden path stretching before you, the cool air from the wind catcher still lingering in your skin. But there's something more on the horizon, another hidden piece of ancient Persian ingenuity that's waiting to be discovered. As you move deeper into the heart of the garden, the lush greenery begins to thin, and you see something unexpected, another marvel of Persian ingenuity, rising like an ancient tower of secrets. Before you, a towering yakshal stands in quiet defiance of the scorching sun, its massive walls built from mud and brick. It looks like an ancient beehive, its circular structure rising high into the sky, almost impervious to the heat that roars outside. That you've seen icehouses before, but this is no ordinary one. The yakshal was the Persian solution to storing ice in the desert, long before modern refrigeration was even a thought. You pause for a moment, trying to wrap your mind around the fact that ancient people, without the benefit of modern technology, figured out how to store ice during the hottest months of the year. It said that these ingenious structures could keep ice frozen throughout the long Persian summers, thanks to a combination of the thick mud walls and a system of underground canals. These qanats, as they're called, carried cool water from underground springs to the yakshal, where the ice would be stored and protected from the desert heat. Inside, the temperature remained steady, even when the sun beat down mercilessly. It's mind-boggling to think that an ancient civilization could create such a delicate system, one that worked in perfect harmony with nature's cycles. You look at the yakshal in awe, the walls curving upwards to a point, with small vents poking out like the eyes of a curious creature. The architecture is stunning, not just functional, but beautiful. Each yakshal was built with a sense of artistry, blending seamlessly into the desert landscape. They weren't just storage units, they were landmarks, symbols of Persian innovation, but it wasn't just about storing ice. The yakshal had another vital function: it was a communal hub. Imagine the scene. Early mornings in the Persian cities, people gather around the yakshal, waiting for the ice to be delivered. It wasn't just about getting something cold to drink. The ice was also used to cool food, preserve delicacies, and even prepare special sweet treats for the most important festivals. People would gather here, sharing stories and gossip while they waited, using the time as an opportunity for social connection. Historians still debate just how widespread these icehouses were, and to what extent they influenced the development of refrigeration in the ancient world. Some argue that the Persians were ahead of their time, and that these yakshals were an early precursor to modern ice-making systems. Others, however, claim that the Greeks and Romans may have had similar technologies, making the yakshal a uniquely Persian innovation, but not quite as ahead of its time as it first appears. As you stand here, you can almost hear the soft murmur of ancient voices, the calls to one another as the community gathers around the yakshal. Perhaps the first pioneers of ice would laugh to know that we have such easy access to ice today, pulling it from freezers with the push of a button. But there's something romantic about their methods, don't you think? The way they were able to make something so delicate and intricate out of the simplest materials. You step closer to the yakshal, reaching out to touch its smooth, sun-worn surface. It feels cool to the touch, a reminder of the ancient wisdom it holds within. It's not hard to imagine the wonder of standing in the shade of this incredible structure, looking out over the desert, and thinking that you, too, could survive this unforgiving land, just as the people who built this marvel did. But as you step back, you realize that it wasn't just about survival. It was about thriving in harmony with the environment. The yakshal was more than just a building. It was a symbol of a culture that had learned to live with the land, to understand its rhythms, and to bend nature to their will, just enough to make life in the desert bearable. And in that quiet, shaded space of coolness, you feel something more. You feel a deep sense of calm, as though you've entered a sacred place where time moves just a little slower, and the desert's scorching heat is kept at bay by the quiet wisdom of those who lived here long before you. You continue your journey, the cool breeze still in your hair, and you can't help but wonder how many more ancient secrets are hidden within this garden. What other pieces of forgotten history lie just around the corner, waiting to be uncovered? The desert's heat has begun to fade as the sun dips lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. Your path winds through the garden, and you notice that the air around you is still cool, as though the landscape itself is exhaling in relief. A rustle in the trees catches your attention. One of the Persian garden's most elusive features reveals itself to you: the divine presence of the night-blooming jasmine. This flower, delicate yet powerful, has an enchanting fragrance that carries on the evening breeze. The jasmine scent has been coveted for centuries, and it was no accident that it was chosen as one of the sacred flowers of ancient Persia. The night-blooming jasmine, or Jasminum sambac, would unfurl its petals as night fell, filling the air with a soft, heady aroma. In ancient Persian gardens, this flower was often planted near fountains and waterways to amplify its ethereal fragrance, creating an atmosphere that was both calming and intoxicating. As you wander deeper, the scent of jasmine lingers and wraps around you like a comforting blanket. It's almost as if the garden itself knows how to calm your restless mind, to slow the passage of time. You breathe in deeply, letting the fragrance fill your senses, and for a moment, you forget about the scorching sun of the day and the hustle of the modern world. You are transported back to ancient times, to a moment when the air was still and full of purpose. Historians still debate the cultural significance of the jasmine in ancient Persian society. Some believe that it was seen as a symbol of purity, while others argue it was associated with love and fertility. Either way, jasmine's connection to Persian gardens was profound, and its calming effects were harnessed in a variety of ways. It wasn't just a plant, it was a tool for creating peace and relaxation, something that was cherished in an age when peace was a rare commodity. The jasmine's purpose wasn't merely aesthetic either. Persian scholars and herbalists also understood its medicinal properties. In ancient texts, jasmine was often listed among the ingredients used to create soothing oils and perfumes, and was even believed to have a range of health benefits, from aiding digestion to promoting restful sleep. You may wonder, how many people, centuries ago, drifted off to sleep under the same jasmine-filled sky, the scent filling their rooms as they settled in for a night of rest. The connection between the natural world and human well-being was deep and intertwined that it's easy to see why the night-blooming jasmine was so cherished. In the desert, where every day was an exhausting test of survival, it must have been a welcome reprieve to enter a garden filled with such beauty and tranquility. The scent of jasmine likely lingered long after the sun had set, wrapping itself around the people who spent their evenings here like an invisible presence, a reminder that beauty and peace could be found even in the harshest of places. As you continue walking through the garden, the air now thick with the aroma of jasmine, your senses are overwhelmed with the knowledge that this plant, this flower, was once a prized possession of the Persian elite. These gardens weren't just about survival or utility. They were about cultivating moments of beauty and peace amidst the chaos of daily life. Now, though, as the twilight deepens and the garden begins to take on a dreamlike quality, you can't help but reflect on the deeper significance of the jasmine's fragrance. It's as if the plant knew its role, how it was meant to soothe, to heal, and to restore. And perhaps, in this moment, it does the same for you. The weight of the day slips off your shoulders, replaced by a calmness that can only come from the quiet, subtle power of nature. You pause for a moment, feeling the last rays of the sun caress your skin. You have walked through the garden's wonders, witnessed the clever engineering of ancient builders, and felt the deep connection between humans and nature that was such a hallmark of Persian life. Yet, it is the fragrance of this flower, the way it effortlessly fills the air with its sweetness, that seems to bring it all together. Historians still debate how the ancient Persians managed to create such a seamless blend of beauty, function, and relaxation in their gardens. Was it their understanding of nature's rhythms? Their meticulous attention to detail? Or was it simply that they understood something we've long forgotten, the importance of creating spaces that nourish the soul, not just the body? With each step you take in this timeless garden, it becomes clearer. Persian gardens weren't just a place to escape the heat, they were an oasis for the mind, a refuge for those seeking peace in a turbulent world. As the night deepens, the once bright sun now a distant memory, you find yourself walking beside the tranquil sound of a fountain. The sound is soft, yet consistent, like a lullaby that keeps the garden awake even as the world sleeps. There's something almost meditative about it, how the water flows gently, carrying with it the coolness of the desert night, and you wonder, just for a second, if the ancient Persians ever knew the true magic of such simplicity. It's here by the fountain that you begin to notice another quiet marvel of the garden, the water channels that crisscross the entire space. These aren't just ordinary waterways, they're a part of something far more significant, qanats, a sophisticated ancient Persian system of underground aqueducts that brought water from distant sources into the heart of the garden. The Persian understanding of water management was nothing short of brilliant. You pause, letting the sound of water flow through you. Imagine for a moment the innovation behind the qanats. Ancient Persian engineers designed these channels to take advantage of the natural landscape slopes, creating a system that brought water through underground tunnels, preventing it from evaporating in the scorching sun. This method not only ensured a reliable water supply for the garden, but it also kept the temperature cooler, a subtle yet crucial component of the Persian garden's overall design. Historians often marvel at the qanat system. In some places, these aqueducts were the lifeblood of entire civilizations, transporting water over vast distances, sometimes hundreds of miles. The fact that this technology was developed more than 2,000 years ago and is still in use today in parts of the Middle East speaks volumes about the ingenuity and foresight of those ancient engineers. As you stand there, listening to the water trickle through the channels, you can almost feel the pulse of the land. Water wasn't just a resource for survival, it was a tool for transformation. In the arid regions of Persia, the mere presence of water in a garden was a sign of wealth, but it was more than that. It represented life, growth, and the promise of something beautiful emerging from the barren desert. And so, these gardens, with their cool, refreshing waters and shaded pathways, were not just for leisure, they were a testament to the power of human ingenuity and perseverance. The Persians, however, didn't just rely on water for the sake of survival or beauty. They were masters at creating microclimates, small, self-contained ecosystems where the temperature and humidity were controlled in a way that made life more bearable in the desert heat. You can imagine how these carefully designed gardens, filled with cool, flowing water and shaded areas, might have offered not just comfort, but an almost spiritual retreat. For those who entered these gardens, it was as if they stepped into a world apart, where nature's harshest elements were kept at bay, replaced by calm, cool spaces meant for contemplation. Of course, as with many innovations of the ancient world, there's still some debate over how exactly the Persians developed such remarkable systems. Some historians believe that the qanats were inspired by earlier water systems from ancient Mesopotamia, while others argue that the Persians were the true innovators, developing the technique independently. Whatever the origin, one thing is clear: the qanat system was revolutionary, and it played an essential role in the Persian garden's success. As you continue along the canal, it becomes even more apparent just how much thought and care went into this garden. Every element, water, plants, shade, and stone, was carefully planned to create the perfect environment for relaxation. It was a place designed to help the body recover from the stresses of life, but also to quiet the mind, allowing those who walked here to disconnect from the world outside. A soft breeze stirs the water's surface, creating gentle ripples that reflect the moonlight. It's almost as if the entire garden is alive, breathing with you. The qanats, though invisible underground, are all around you, guiding the water, guiding the life. Without these quiet, hidden waterways, this garden wouldn't exist in its current form. It's a humbling reminder of how much we rely on the unseen forces of nature, and how little we understand about their true power. For a moment, you feel deeply connected to this place, to the earth, and to the people who created it. These gardens weren't just a luxury or a status symbol, they were a symbol of human resilience. In a world where the heat of the desert could burn away everything in its path, these gardens stood as an island of coolness, a sanctuary from the relentless sun. They were a triumph of the human spirit, built to withstand the test of time. The idea of the garden as a place of refuge, a peaceful retreat from the outside world, is something that has transcended cultures and eras. From the ancient Persians to today, people have always sought to create spaces where they can find solace, where they can rest, recover, and refresh. And perhaps that's why gardens, like this one, continue to hold such a special place in our hearts today. As the evening settles deeper, you're drawn further into the garden's calming embrace. The soft murmur of water and the coolness of the air seem to invite you to rest. But as you wander through this tranquil paradise, you can't help but wonder how it all works, how the Persian gardeners, with their wisdom and precision, managed to cultivate such a peaceful haven in the middle of an unforgiving landscape. One of the key elements of these gardens, you discover, is the use of shade. The Persian gardeners knew that protecting delicate plants from the harsh midday sun was just as important as ensuring they had enough water to thrive. To achieve this, they planted a wide variety of shade trees, many of which had to be carefully chosen for their ability to thrive in the hot, dry environment. Some of these trees, like the plane tree, were particularly valued because of their dense canopy that provided the ideal cover for both plants and people. Imagine yourself now, resting under the shade of one of these towering trees. The soft rustle of leaves above you and the faint scent of damp earth fill the air. You can almost feel the relief from the heat, the way the temperature drops as the sun disappears behind the horizon. The Persians understood this simple pleasure, the cool, soothing relief of shade on a hot day. And so, these trees became more than just sources of shade, they were symbols of respite, places where people could gather to rest, chat, and find shelter from the sun's unrelenting rays. But these trees weren't the only source of shade. The gardeners also used trellises and arbors, beautiful, vine-covered structures that provided further relief. The vines that draped over these wooden frames created a dappled effect, letting just enough sunlight filter through to create a soft, filtered light that was far gentler than the harsh rays of midday. These structures were often placed near benches or seating areas, perfect for visitors looking to relax and unwind in the cool, sheltered space. It's fascinating to think about how these gardens, with their carefully arranged plants and water systems, were also designed to cater to the needs of the human body and mind. The shaded areas provided much-needed relief from the heat, but they also encouraged social interaction. The Persians understood that these gardens weren't just places to rest, they were also spaces for community, where people could gather and enjoy one another's company in a setting that invited relaxation. Historians still debate how exactly the Persians came up with such a harmonious blend of nature and architecture. Some argue that Persian gardens were inspired by earlier Mesopotamian gardens, while others believe that the Persians developed their own unique style. The inclusion of shade trees and trellises, along with the complex water systems and geometric design, created an environment where nature and human comfort worked together seamlessly. What's even more fascinating is that the Persian approach to gardens wasn't just about creating beauty. It was about creating balance, between nature and humanity, between sunlight and shade, between water and dry land. The ancient Persians didn't just plant gardens for the sake of aesthetics, they planted them as an expression of their understanding of nature and their desire to create spaces that would nurture not only the body but also the soul. As you move through the garden, your feet crunching softly on the gravel pathways, you start to notice the intricate ways that nature itself seems to be playing a part in the overall design. The water flows in a careful pattern, winding its way around the garden, while the trees and plants seem to stand in perfect harmony, each one chosen for its ability to thrive in the desert climate and contribute to the overall balance of the space. It's a humbling thought, really. The knowledge that the Persian gardeners of ancient times were not only focused on the aesthetic beauty of their gardens but were also deeply aware of the healing properties of nature. These gardens were more than just places to relax, they were places where people could reconnect with nature and find comfort and peace in a world that was often harsh and unforgiving. The idea of using shade and coolness as a form of healing is something that many modern gardens still embrace today. People still seek out shade in hot climates, still yearn for that moment of relief from the sun's intensity. And while modern gardens may not have the same intricate water systems or ancient methods of cooling, there's still a deep connection to the past in the way we approach our green spaces. You take a deep breath, inhaling the cool night air, and feel a sense of calm wash over you. The garden, with all its shade and beauty, is a reminder of how the simplest things, water, trees, and a bit of shade, can bring comfort, healing, and peace. The Persians, with their deep understanding of nature and its rhythms, knew this instinctively. And now, centuries later, you're standing in the midst of it all, appreciating the timeless wisdom of those who came before you. As you step deeper into the coolness of the garden, it becomes clear that the Persians had an almost mystical relationship with their environment. Everything here, from the flowing water to the shade trees, was purposefully designed not just for utility, but to evoke a feeling of deep connection to nature and to the divine. One of the most striking features of these gardens was the use of geometric symmetry. Persian gardens were designed with an almost obsessive attention to balance and order. You might even feel the symmetry as you walk along the paths, the way each step seems to align with the next. The Persians believed that these geometric patterns reflected the divine order of the universe. The symmetrical arrangement of trees, water, and plants was seen as a way of bringing a sense of peace and harmony to the world. Imagine yourself walking along one of the garden's many pathways. The edges of the path are lined with low stone walls, neatly trimmed hedges, and small flowers. Everything is perfectly aligned, almost as if the garden itself were a living mandala, each piece contributing to the whole. The Persian gardeners didn't just plant for beauty or function, they designed their gardens to reflect the idea of paradise, an ideal place that mirrored the world beyond, a space where everything was in perfect harmony. These gardens were often laid out with 4 primary paths that formed a cross in the center. This was not just an aesthetic choice, but also a spiritual one. The cross-shaped layout was symbolic of the four corners of the earth and represented the Persian understanding of the world and its balance. It's as if each path led to a different element: water, earth, air, and fire, and each represented an essential force in the universe. The symbolism behind the layout of these gardens is deeply rooted in the ancient Persian worldview. Zoroastrianism, the religion of the Persians at the time, emphasized the importance of balance and order. The Persian gardens were not merely places of beauty, they were reflections of the cosmic order. The water that flowed through the garden was not just for irrigation, it was a symbol of life, purity, and renewal. And the trees, arranged in symmetrical rows, weren't just planted for shade, they were there to symbolize the connection between the human world and the divine. As you stand in the middle of the garden, it's hard not to feel the peace that these geometric patterns create. The carefully placed stones, the pathways that stretch in perfect lines, the gentle curves of the trees, it all seems to fit together in a way that feels almost otherworldly. The Persians were masters of creating spaces that transcended the mundane, spaces where the ordinary became sacred. Historians still argue over how far the influence of Zoroastrianism really extended into the design of these gardens. Some scholars believe that the gardens were a literal representation of paradise on earth, while others think the spiritual symbolism was simply a product of Persian culture's deep connection to nature. Regardless of the interpretation, it's clear that these gardens were much more than just decorative spaces. They were places where people could come face to face with something greater than themselves. As you walk along the path, you notice the way the water in the fountains catches the light, the ripples dancing across the surface like tiny reflections of the heavens. This, too, was a deliberate design choice. The use of water was not just for beauty, but also for its symbolism of life's flow and vitality. The sound of the water, gentle and rhythmic, creates a soothing ambience, almost like a lullaby sung by the earth itself. It's no wonder the Persians believed that these gardens were sacred places where the divine and earthly worlds met. You might even find yourself stopping by one of the fountains, listening to the water's soft flow. It's easy to get lost in the tranquil sound, almost as if you're floating in a dream, surrounded by a world of harmony and peace. And yet, beneath the calm surface, there's a deeper understanding, the realization that these gardens weren't just places to escape, they were places to reconnect. Reconnect with nature. Reconnect with the divine. Reconnect with the idea of balance that the ancient Persians so revered. In a way, these gardens were ahead of their time. They were designed with sustainability in mind, long before the term even existed. The use of water channels, shade, and geometric patterns weren't just practical, they were a holistic approach to creating a space where people could live in harmony with the land. The Persian gardeners didn't just plant and water, they shaped the environment in a way that reflected their values and beliefs, creating a world that was balanced, beautiful, and timeless. Historians still debate whether the Persian gardens were purely functional spaces or if they had a deeper, symbolic meaning. Perhaps they were both. What is clear, however, is that these gardens were designed to do more than just provide food and shade, they were created as spaces where people could experience the perfect harmony of the natural world. And as you sit here in the stillness of the garden, surrounded by the delicate balance of water, shade, and stone, you can't help but feel the wisdom that these ancient gardeners left behind. As the garden stretches before you, the sun has begun to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the neatly aligned trees and paths. The air is still warm, but a cool breeze begins to stir, whispering through the branches of the cypress trees. You pause for a moment, inhaling deeply, and notice the subtle scent of blooming roses and fresh earth. The scent is sharp yet sweet, a perfect contrast to the warm, dry air. It's almost as though the garden, in all its intricate design, is alive, breathing with you. You begin to notice something else, the chilled tea placed beside you on a stone bench. You weren't the only one who had planned ahead, this wasn't just any tea. It was Persian iced tea, carefully brewed, then cooled in the garden's shade. The trick of cooling beverages in such a manner was perfected in ancient Persia, where gardens weren't just lush, but also designed to manage heat in the most soothing of ways. The Persians were masters of this concept, using the natural elements to create comfort in an otherwise harsh environment. The concept of cooling tea, especially in desert climates, seems simple enough now, but it was revolutionary at the time. Persian gardeners had discovered long ago that the earth itself could be used to create pockets of coolness, even in the hottest months. The gardens, in their design, helped to create microclimates where cool air circulated in the midst of desert heat, and this technique had a profound impact on daily Persian life, especially during the intense summer heat. A network of shady groves and streams allowed the warm winds of the desert to be absorbed, and then released as a gentle, cool breeze. In this way, the Persian gardens were more than just aesthetically pleasing, they were functional spaces built for comfort. And it was in the cooling shade of these gardens that the tradition of serving iced tea first began to take shape. It wasn't about putting a cup in the fridge, oh no, this was a much more organic process. A close look at the trees reveals the water channels that line the ground beneath them. These weren't just decorative ponds or pretty fountains, they were vital in cooling the air. The Persians had learned to direct water to flow beneath the branches of trees so that, as it evaporated, the coolness would settle over the area. This process helped moderate the temperature of the air and cool things down, even during the heat of midday. Now, consider the tea itself. It's not just any loose-leaf brew, it's infused with the delicate flavors of herbs such as mint, rosewater, and saffron. When combined with the cool air around you, it creates an almost hypnotic experience. The tea, rich and aromatic, is more than a simple beverage, it's a deeply ceremonial act. In ancient Persia, serving and drinking tea was not a hurried process, but rather a time for contemplation and rest. The tea, chilled by the strategic cooling of the garden's atmosphere, was seen as a way to balance the body's heat and bring a sense of tranquility. Historians still debate whether the use of cool gardens to chill beverages was as common as it seems or whether it was a luxury reserved for the elite. Some scholars argue that the cooling techniques were only available to the wealthiest Persians who had access to private gardens, while others claim that these methods were more widely known and utilized by ordinary people. Regardless of the specifics, one thing is clear, the role of the Persian garden in creating comfort through the manipulation of nature was nothing short of brilliant. It was here, in the cool embrace of the garden, that the world's first iced tea was born, an act of blending nature's wisdom with the simple pleasure of a cool, refreshing drink. The very process of preparing and drinking tea in the Persian garden was a form of art. And when you sit there, sipping your tea as the sun continues its descent, you can't help but feel the quiet joy of connecting with something so timeless. The use of shade and wind to cool beverages was one of many ways the Persians had mastered the art of living in harmony with their environment. These gardens were carefully crafted with the intention of providing more than just a visual feast. They were spaces where people could truly live comfortably despite the harsh realities of the climate around them. The cooling of tea was just one small, yet significant, piece of this larger picture, a perfect example of how the Persians used every element at their disposal to craft a life that balanced beauty, comfort, and nature's rhythms. As you take another sip, the coolness of the tea seems to seep deeper into your senses, bringing a wave of calm and relaxation that mirrors the tranquility of the garden itself. You realize that this simple act of drinking tea, which has become so commonplace today, was once a practice deeply rooted in wisdom, a reflection of the Persian people's understanding of the world and their ability to create harmony within it. As the tea cools in your hand, the garden around you begins to take on a deeper, more mysterious quality. The sun is now setting, casting a soft orange glow over the garden's landscape. The flowers that had once been the bright stars of the garden have now taken on deeper hues, their colors more pronounced as they bask in the softening light. The air around you has grown cooler still, thanks to the clever network of waterways and the cooling techniques used by Persian gardeners. The gentle wind whispers through the trees once again, bringing with it the scent of mint and the faintest traces of frankincense that were burned in the distance. The Persians didn't just stop at cooling drinks. Their gardens were designed with every sensory experience in mind, and cooling the air was just the beginning of how they transformed the landscape into a place of comfort and beauty. The very layout of the garden was carefully planned to ensure that the coolness created by the trees and water would be felt in every corner, and this design was more than just functional. It was a holistic approach to comfort that blended both form and function seamlessly. The use of water, shade, and the clever placement of trees created an environment that wasn't just pleasant to look at, but also pleasant to live in. If you look closely at the water channels that snake through the garden, you'll notice something even more interesting. The placement of these channels was not random, but designed to create balance and harmony. The water flowed in such a way that it would pass under the shade of trees, cooling the air before it reached any of the open spaces in the garden. The entire system of water, shade, and wind was set up in such a way that it allowed for maximum cooling with minimal effort. Persian gardeners had learned to harness the wind, water, and shade to create an oasis in the desert. The garden wasn't just a luxury, it was a necessity in a land where the summer heat could easily become unbearable. Historians still argue whether this precise and intricate gardening technique was first introduced by the Persian Empire or whether it was the legacy of earlier civilizations. Some scholars believe the Egyptians may have been the first to use water features in their gardens to cool the air, while others point to the ancient Mesopotamians. Regardless of the origin, what's certain is that the Persians perfected the art of the cool garden, making it an integral part of their daily life. As you sit there, sipping your chilled tea, you might begin to imagine what life must have been like for those who lived in ancient Persia. For the people who worked these gardens, there was an almost spiritual quality to their work. The act of tending to plants, manipulating the environment to create comfort and beauty, was a form of art, a way of connecting with nature on a deeper level. Persian gardeners were more than just caretakers, they were artists, shaping their world with the delicate balance of water, wind, and shade. The cool breeze that stirs the trees now seems to bring with it a sense of timelessness. It's as if, for a moment, you've been transported back in time to a Persian garden of ancient days. The soft sound of water flowing through the channels is soothing, almost like a lullaby, carrying you deeper into the sense of peace and serenity that the garden offers. Your thoughts drift, and you realize that this was more than just a garden, it was a sanctuary, a refuge from the harsh world outside. Persians were masters at creating these sanctuaries, and their gardens were designed to nurture the body and the soul. The cooling of tea, the use of water features, and the careful arrangement of plants were all part of a larger design meant to ease the burdens of daily life. You can't help but feel a sense of awe at the knowledge and ingenuity of the people who created these spaces, as well as the understanding they had of the natural world around them. The air, the tea, and the garden have come together in such a way that it's hard not to think that the Persian gardens were, in their own way, a kind of paradise. It's easy to forget just how much ancient civilizations were able to accomplish with relatively simple tools and knowledge. The Persians, with their understanding of the environment, were able to create a living space that was not just beautiful, but functional, a place where life could be lived comfortably even in the most difficult of climates. You take another sip of your tea, letting the coolness spread through you, and can't help but think that perhaps the ancient world had more to teach us than we might realize. As the sun sets fully, and the garden around you is bathed in a soft, calming twilight, you find yourself at peace, content in the knowledge that you are, for this moment, a part of something timeless. The garden, the tea, and the breeze all seem to converge in a perfect moment of serenity. The cool air wraps around you like a comforting embrace, and for a fleeting second, you understand just what the Persian gardeners must have known all along, that the balance of nature, beauty, and comfort can create a space where the world slows down, and the mind is free to rest. As the twilight deepens, the air seems to settle into a rhythm, as if nature itself is winding down for the night. The scent of jasmine begins to mix with the lingering notes of mint, and the cool air carries with it the promise of a peaceful night's sleep. The Persian garden, with all its elegance and ingenuity, begins to feel like a living, breathing entity, a sanctuary where every element, from the flow of water to the rustle of the trees, is in perfect harmony. Now, as you sit there, sipping your tea, you might find yourself wondering how such a tranquil, almost magical place could come to be in a world filled with chaos and warfare. After all, the Persian Empire was not known solely for its peaceful gardens, but for its vast armies, complex politics, and sprawling cities. Yet, the very same people who built empires and waged wars also had the foresight to create these havens of peace. This contrast between strength and serenity is one of the most fascinating aspects of Persian culture. It's a reminder that, even in the midst of conflict, the pursuit of beauty and comfort was seen as something worth preserving. The contrast between the strength of Persian rule and the delicacy of their gardens is a reflection of how nature and culture were intertwined in the minds of the Persian people. They understood that power alone could not sustain a civilization. It was the balance between civilization and nature, strength and serenity, that allowed for a truly thriving society. Persian gardens were not just places of beauty, but symbols of cultural sophistication, representing the empire's mastery over the natural world, as well as their deep connection to it. As the night deepens, the once golden light of the sun fades completely, leaving only the moon to cast a soft glow over the garden. The sounds of the wind, the soft ripples of water, and the occasional rustle of leaves all seem to blend together into a single, calming symphony. The piping of distant birds, now quieter in the cool of the night, adds a gentle melody to the peaceful surroundings. It's as if the entire world is quietly slipping into slumber, and the Persian garden, with its carefully designed balance of water, wind, and shade, is the perfect place to do just that. The very concept of these gardens was ahead of its time, offering not only a place of beauty and leisure but a sanctuary that took into account the deeper psychological and spiritual needs of the people. The Persians didn't just create gardens, they created environments where the body could rest, the mind could reflect, and the soul could find solace. These gardens were more than just ornamental, they were deeply healing, offering a space for introspection and tranquility in a world that was often anything but peaceful. As you reflect on this, sipping the last of your cool tea, you can't help but think about the nature of gardens in general. Gardens, in many cultures, are seen as places of renewal and rebirth, spaces where life's most difficult questions can be put aside for a time, where one can pause and take in the beauty of the world around them. Persian gardens, in their quiet way, embodied this idea to perfection. They were not just spaces for beauty, they were spaces for reflection, where one could find solace amidst the storm. In ancient Persia, these gardens were often places where the elite gathered, a symbol of their status and wealth. Yet, they were also open to those who could appreciate the natural world and the soothing power of a well-designed space. The gardens served not only the aristocracy but also the intellectuals, artists, and thinkers of the time. In many ways, they were a place for the mind to unwind as much as the body. You begin to feel a bit lighter now, the world around you settling into a comfortable silence. The air feels even cooler now, a gentle breeze that ruffles the trees and brings with it the sound of distant waters. There's a sense of calm that comes over you as you sit back and let the rhythm of the garden take over. The Persian gardeners, those ancient masters of landscape design, have created a space that feels as though it has always been here, quietly waiting for someone to appreciate it. And as you drift off in your mind to the soothing world of ancient Persia, you realize that perhaps the greatest lesson they left behind was this, that in the pursuit of beauty and comfort, we find not only peace but a deeper connection to the world around us. Historians still argue whether the ancient Persian gardens were truly the first to incorporate water-based cooling techniques, or if there were other, lesser-known cultures that came before them. Some even debate whether the grandeur of these gardens was a direct response to the arid climate, or if they were a way to symbolically mirror the gardens of paradise that were central to Persian religious beliefs. Whatever the case may be, the legacy of these gardens endures, and the principles behind them continue to influence garden design to this very day. The moon now casts its silvery light on the landscape, and the garden feels even more serene, as though it's been gently enveloped in a quiet embrace. The Persian garden, with all its intricate planning, its careful design, and its quiet beauty, has worked its magic. You're no longer just an observer of the garden, you've become a part of it. The air, the scent, the coolness, and the peace have settled within you, and you begin to feel the gentle pull of sleep. As the final whispers of evening start to settle, a quiet peace envelopes you. The Persian garden, with its perfect harmony of design and nature, has left an indelible mark on your mind. The gentle breeze brushes past, its coolness now carrying a hint of nighttime dew. The rustle of the leaves is softer now, like a lullaby played by nature itself. You feel the weight of the world easing, as if, just for tonight, you are free from the hustle of everyday life. As you slip deeper into relaxation, you begin to notice the softer details of the garden that might have gone unnoticed before. The ripples in the water no longer seem like mere movements but feel more like a rhythmic dance, each wave flowing in a soft, predictable pattern, lulling you closer to sleep. The distant sound of birds has faded to a gentle hum, almost like a whisper carried on the wind. The coolness of the stone paths, the feel of the soft grass underfoot, all of it now seems distant, as if you're watching this tranquil scene from the comfort of your own mind, wrapped in the blanket of calm the garden has provided. The Persian gardens, with their perfect blend of natural elements and human ingenuity, were more than just beautiful spaces. They were philosophical statements, reflecting a belief that balance, peace, and thoughtful design could help elevate the soul. The art of Persian garden making wasn't merely about aesthetics, it was about creating a space where one could escape the chaotic world and reconnect with the self. These gardens were designed to invite contemplation, and for centuries, they've done just that. And now, as you sit here, within the quiet refuge of your imagination, you too are experiencing the benefits of this ancient wisdom. A calmness now takes hold of your body, as your muscles relax and the tension of the day melts away. Persian gardens, while known for their visual beauty, also had an emotional impact, something that extended far beyond their design. They were places for rest, spaces where the mind could wander without distraction, where time seemed to stand still. The air in these gardens was intentionally cooled to invite relaxation. No detail, no matter how small, was overlooked in creating the perfect atmosphere for contemplation. And as you drift deeper into the embrace of this calming environment, you feel a growing sense of gratitude for those long-ago gardeners who, with their artistry, gave the world this timeless gift. The connection between nature and humanity in these gardens was not just symbolic, it was an intimate relationship that permeated the very design of the space. Every element, the coolness of the water, the gentle shade of the trees, the rhythmic sound of the wind, was carefully considered to create an atmosphere conducive to inner peace. Perhaps, in a world filled with noise and distraction, it is this balance that we seek to replicate. The lessons from these Persian gardens are not merely about how to design a beautiful space but about how to cultivate a mindset of peace. As your thoughts settle and the soft sounds of nature surround you, it becomes clear that the gardens were designed with one ultimate goal: to foster a sense of relaxation and renewal. The gardens, in their perfect stillness, provided a sanctuary from the overwhelming demands of life. The cool air that helped soothe tea, the calming rhythm of the water, and the peaceful seclusion of the trees worked together to offer a respite from the stresses of the world. The more you reflect on these gardens, the more you realize that this sense of peace is not just a luxury, it is a necessity for the human spirit. You, too, begin to feel this peace settling within you. The coolness of the evening seems to wrap itself around you, cocooning you in tranquility. The soft murmurs of the garden have long since faded into the background, now nothing more than a distant memory, like the final fading echoes of a lullaby. The world around you has slowed to a peaceful crawl, and as you settle deeper into your own mind, the gentle sway of the trees and the rhythmic flow of water seem to echo through your thoughts, reminding you of the harmony they once created. The stillness, the peace, and the serenity of this imagined Persian garden are now part of you. As your breathing deepens and your eyelids grow heavy, you feel yourself sinking further into relaxation. The stresses and strains of your day dissolve completely, leaving behind nothing but the soothing sounds of nature's soft song. The Persian garden, with all its beauty and balance, continues to thrive in your imagination, offering you the same refuge it offered to ancient souls seeking peace in a tumultuous world. Historians, much like you, often reflect on the way these gardens transcended their physical design. Some argue that the gardens were not only places for rest but spaces of cultural reflection, a way for the Persian people to connect with the spiritual realm. Others debate whether the gardens served purely as symbols of wealth and status. But what remains undeniable is their impact, on the Persian people, on the world of architecture, and, as we've seen tonight, on your own sense of calm. As the moonlight grows stronger, casting its soft glow on the scene around you, the Persian garden continues to live on in your imagination. The water flows gently, the trees sway peacefully, and the cool air continues to whisper through the leaves, carrying with it the promise of a peaceful night's sleep. Now, as the last remnants of the garden fade away, you find yourself drifting into the most restful sleep, with the tranquility of the Persian garden still cradling your thoughts. The garden remains with you, a symbol of peace, balance, and the timeless wisdom of ancient Persia.